My mother-in-law announced she was taking my baby at his first birthday party. The backyard was decorated with balloons, blue and white, because those were the colors Marcus had insisted on. Traditional, he had said. Proper. Everything in the Morrison family had to be traditional and proper, even a one-year-old's birthday party. 50 guests were gathered on the manicured lawn of Eleanor Morrison's estate. Family members, neighbors, colleagues from Marcus's law firm, women from Eleanor's garden club. The kind of crowd that existed to witness and validate whatever the Morrison family decided to do. I was standing near the cake, a 3-tier masterpiece that Eleanor had commissioned from the most expensive bakery in Raleigh, because God forbid her grandson's first birthday feature anything less than perfection, when Eleanor clinked her champagne glass. "Everyone, may I have your attention, please?" The crowd quieted. Eleanor Morrison commanded attention the way she commanded everything else, with the expectation that obedience was the only acceptable response. "I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate my grandson's first birthday. Little Daniel is such a blessing to our family." She paused, her eyes finding mine across the crowd. "Which is why I have an announcement to make." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. The way she was looking at me, triumphant, predatory, told me that whatever was coming, it wasn't good. As many of you know, I've had concerns about my grandson's care. His mother, she gestured toward me with a dismissive wave, has proven herself to be a terrible mom. Neglectful, incompetent, possibly unstable. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. After careful consideration and consultation with our family attorney, I've decided that Daniel would be better off in my care. I'm taking the baby. She smiled, a cold, satisfied smile. And my husband, Marcus Morrison, standing beside his mother, nodded. Like he'd practiced it. Like this was all part of a plan they had made together. Like I was just an obstacle to be removed. I felt 50 pairs of eyes turned toward me, waiting for my reaction. Waiting for the tears, the protests, the desperate defense that would make me look exactly as unstable as Eleanor had just claimed. But I had been married to Marcus Morrison for 3 years. I knew how this family operated, and I had been preparing for this moment for longer than any of them realized. My name is Vivian Okafor Morrison. I am 32 years old. I was born in Durham, North Carolina, the daughter of Nigerian immigrants who built a successful immigration law practice from a 2-person office into a firm that now serves clients across the entire Research Triangle. My parents taught me many things about power, about patience, about the difference between appearing defeated and actually being defeated. Sometimes the trap looks like a gift, my father used to say. Sometimes the gift looks like a trap. The wise person knows how to tell the difference and how to use both to their advantage. Eleanor Morrison thought she was setting a trap. She was about to discover she had walked into one. I need to tell you about the 3 years that led to this birthday party. I met Marcus Morrison at a legal conference in Charlotte 4 years ago. He was charming, handsome, from one of North Carolina's oldest legal families. His father had been a state Supreme Court justice before his death. His mother was a fixture of Raleigh society. His family name was on buildings. I was the daughter of immigrants, a rising attorney at a boutique firm, still carrying the hunger that comes from knowing nothing is given and everything must be earned. Marcus pursued me with a kind of intensity that felt flattering at the time. He was attentive, romantic, seemingly devoted. He told me I was different from the women his family expected him to marry. That he didn't care about social standing or family approval, that he loved me for who I was. I should have recognized the warning signs. The way he talked about his mother, with a mixture of fear and reverence that wasn't quite normal for a grown man. The way Eleanor looked at me during our first meeting, assessing, calculating, clearly finding me insufficient. The way Marcus always seemed to need his mother's approval, even for decisions that should have been his alone. But I was in love. Or what I thought was love. The kind that makes you blind to patterns you would otherwise see clearly. We married after a year of dating. Eleanor insisted on planning the wedding, and Marcus insisted that we let her, because it's easier than fighting. The ceremony was beautiful but impersonal, designed to impress Eleanor's social circle rather than celebrate our union. I told myself it was just wedding stress. That things would be different once we were actually married. Things were different. they were worse. The first year of marriage was a slow education in the Morrison family dynamics. Eleanor was not merely Marcus's mother. She was the center around which his entire universe orbited. Every decision, from where we would live to how we would spend holidays to what we would name our future children, required her approval. When I pushed back, I was difficult. When I objected, I was not understanding family traditions. When I tried to establish boundaries, I was trying to drive a wedge between Marcus and his mother. And Marcus? Marcus always sided with Eleanor, always found ways to frame my concerns as overreactions, always made me feel like I was the problem. I began to recognize the pattern. I wasn't Marcus's wife. I was an interloper in the Morrison family system, tolerated only as long as I didn't disrupt their established order. By the end of year 1, I was isolated from most of my friends. My work hours had been reduced because Marcus insisted I needed to focus on family. My relationship with my own parents had become strained because Eleanor always scheduled events that conflicted with my family's gatherings. I was being systematically cut off from everything that had made me who I was. And I was starting to understand why. Getting pregnant with Daniel changed everything. The moment Eleanor learned she would have a grandson, she had insisted on genetic testing early enough to determine sex. Her attitude toward me shifted. Not to warmth, but to a new kind of intensity. She began showing up unannounced at our house, commenting on what I ate, criticizing my exercise routine, suggesting that I was doing everything wrong and needed her guidance. "You don't know how to raise a Morrison," she told me during one of her visits. "You weren't raised properly yourself. But don't worry, I'll teach you." The pregnancy was difficult. Not physically, I was healthy throughout, but emotionally. Eleanor's constant presence, constant criticism, constant undermining of my every decision made me feel like a vessel rather than a mother. Marcus was no help. He agreed with whatever his mother said, told me I was being too sensitive, suggested that I should be grateful for Eleanor's involvement. When Daniel was born, I held him in my arms and felt something I hadn't felt in years: pure, uncomplicated love. Love that wasn't tangled up in manipulation and control. Love that was just mine. And in that moment, I made a decision. I would not let Eleanor Morrison do to my son what she had done to hers. I would not let Daniel grow up as another satellite orbiting her needs. Whatever it took, I would protect him. The first year of Daniel's life was a battle fought in small, invisible ways. Eleanor wanted to hire a nanny, one of her choosing, from an agency she controlled. I insisted on caring for Daniel myself. Eleanor wanted Daniel baptized at her church by her priest with her guest list. I requested a smaller ceremony that included my own family. We compromised her church, but my parents were allowed to attend. Eleanor wanted to establish a nursery at her estate so Daniel could spend more time with his grandmother. I politely declined and installed security cameras at our house instead. Every battle was exhausting. Every victory was followed by new attacks. Eleanor probed constantly for weaknesses, looking for ways to increase her control over my son. And Marcus, my husband, Daniel's father, was always on her side. "You're being paranoid," he told me when I expressed concerns. "Mom just wants to help," he said when I objected to her interference. "You're turning our son against his grandmother," he accused when I tried to limit Eleanor's access. I began documenting everything. Every conversation, every incident, every example of Eleanor's attempts to undermine my parenting. I kept detailed journals. I saved text messages and emails. I installed nanny cams that Eleanor didn't know about. I was building a case. I just didn't know yet exactly what kind of case it would be. The real discovery happened 3 months before Daniel's first birthday. Marcus had been acting strangely, more secretive than usual, more absent, more distant. He claimed it was work stress, but something felt wrong. I found the folder by accident. Marcus had left his laptop open, and when I went to close it, I saw a document on the screen: Custody Strategy, Morrison v. Morrison. My blood ran cold. I opened the folder and began reading. What I found was a comprehensive plan to take my son away from me. Eleanor had hired a family law attorney, one of the most aggressive custody litigators in the state, to prepare a case claiming I was an unfit mother. The file contained fabricated evidence, manipulated records, and testimonies from people I barely knew, all designed to paint me as negligent, unstable, and dangerous. There were emails between Marcus and Eleanor discussing how to manage me during the process, how to ensure I didn't cause a scene, how to present a unified front to the court. There were financial records showing that Eleanor had already established a trust fund for Daniel, one that explicitly excluded me from any involvement in his care. And there was something else, something that made everything click into place: a DNA test, ordered by Eleanor 3 months after Daniel was born, with results that she had kept hidden from Marcus. Results that showed something Eleanor had never intended anyone to see. I sat in the dark, reading through the folder, and began to understand the full scope of what was happening. Eleanor Morrison wasn't just trying to take my son. She was hiding something about her own family, something that would change everything. Let me explain what I discovered. The DNA test had been ordered by Eleanor under the guise of establishing family medical history. She had convinced Marcus that it was routine, that all Morrison children underwent genetic screening to check for hereditary conditions. But the test Eleanor received wasn't just checking for medical conditions. It was a full paternity analysis. And the results showed something Eleanor had desperately hoped to keep secret. Daniel was not Marcus's biological son. I stared at the results, my mind reeling. Not Marcus's son? But that was impossible. I had never been with anyone else. Marcus was the only man I had slept with since we started dating. Daniel was absolutely, unquestionably his child. Unless I read the analysis more carefully. The test didn't just show that Daniel wasn't Marcus's biological child. It showed that Daniel shared DNA with the Morrison family, but not through Marcus. There was only one explanation. Daniel's biological father was another Morrison. And there was only one other Morrison male of appropriate age: Eleanor's younger brother, Richard. The one who had been present at our wedding. The one who had made comments about my appearance that Marcus had laughed off as just Uncle Richard being Uncle Richard. The one who had insisted on welcoming me to the family with a private conversation that had made me deeply uncomfortable. The conversation that had happened one night when I had been drinking at a family event. The night I had woken up the next morning feeling strange, disoriented, with gaps in my memory I couldn't explain. The night Marcus had been working late and Eleanor had insisted I stay at the family estate. I had convinced myself nothing had happened. I had pushed the unease away, blamed it on too much wine, refused to consider the alternative. Now, looking at this DNA test, I understood what Eleanor had been hiding. Her brother had assaulted me, and she was trying to take my son, her brother's son, to cover it up. I didn't confront anyone immediately. Instead, I did what my parents had taught me to do when facing a powerful adversary. I gathered information. I built my case. I prepared for war. I ordered my own DNA test, a comprehensive analysis that would confirm what Eleanor's hidden test had shown. I did it through a lab Eleanor didn't control, with samples collected discreetly. The results confirmed everything. Daniel shared DNA with the Morrison family, but his biological father was not Marcus Morrison. His biological father was Richard Morrison, Eleanor's brother. I contacted my parents' law firm. I explained what I had discovered. I asked them to connect me with specialists in family law and criminal prosecution. What Richard had done to me was a crime. What Eleanor was doing, covering it up, protecting her brother, attempting to gain custody of a child conceived through assault, was arguably criminal as well. But I knew that taking on the Morrison family directly would be difficult. They had money, connections, influence. Richard was a retired judge with powerful friends throughout the legal system. Eleanor sat on boards with half the judges in Wake County. I needed leverage, and I found it in the most unlikely place. It turned out that I wasn't Richard Morrison's only victim. My attorneys hired a private investigator to look into Richard's past. What they found was a pattern of behavior stretching back decades. Multiple women had reported incidents similar to mine: disorientation at family events, gaps in memory, uncomfortable encounters they couldn't fully explain. Most had been too afraid to come forward. Some had been paid off. Others had simply disappeared from the Morrison orbit, warned by Eleanor that making accusations would destroy their lives. But 3 women were willing to talk. 3 women who had experienced what I had experienced and had been waiting for years for someone to believe them. Their testimonies, combined with my DNA evidence and Eleanor's hidden files, created a picture of systematic predation protected by family money and power. It was enough to file criminal charges. It was enough to destroy the Morrison family's carefully constructed reputation. And it was the leverage I needed for what would happen at Daniel's first birthday party. I notified the authorities 2 weeks before the party. I explained everything: the DNA evidence, the witness testimonies, Eleanor's conspiracy to cover up her brother's crimes, the custody plot designed to silence me and control the child conceived through assault. The district attorney was interested, very interested, but they needed to build their case carefully. The Morrisons were powerful. Any prosecution would face intense scrutiny and well-funded defense attorneys. We agreed on a plan. I would let Eleanor make her move at the birthday party. I would let her announce her intentions in front of witnesses. I would let her believe she had one. And then the authorities would arrive. Not for me, for her. Now let me tell you about the birthday party. When Eleanor announced that I was a terrible mom and that she was taking the baby, I let the words land without flinching. 50 people waited for my response. My husband nodded along exactly as I had expected, and I kept my voice soft. Okay, take him. The words echoed across the silent backyard. Eleanor's triumph flickered into confusion. This wasn't the response she had prepared for. She had expected tears, protests, maybe a public breakdown that would prove her claims about my instability. Instead, I was calm, cooperative, almost serene. "What did you say?" she asked. I said, "Okay. You want to take Daniel? Take him." I stepped toward her, holding my son in my arms. He was wearing the little blue outfit Eleanor had chosen for him, another thing she had controlled, another decision made without my input. "Take him," I repeated. "If that's what the family wants, I won't fight it." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. She sensed a trap but couldn't identify it. "Well, good. I'm glad you're being reasonable." She reached for Daniel. I stepped back. "But first, let me make sure we're doing this properly. For Daniel's sake." "What do you mean?" "I mean that any custody transfer should involve the proper authorities, don't you think? Family court, social services, all the legal requirements. We want everything documented." Eleanor's expression hardened. "That won't be necessary. This is a family matter. But you mentioned consulting with your family attorney. Surely you filed the appropriate paperwork." "The paperwork is being handled, is it? Because I didn't receive any notification from the court. And I'm pretty sure that's required before you can just take someone's baby." Murmurs in the crowd. People shifting uncomfortably. This wasn't the simple handover Eleanor had orchestrated. "Vivian, don't make this difficult. I'm not making anything difficult. I'm just asking questions. Legal questions. The kind of questions my parents taught me to ask." Marcus stepped forward, his face red. "Vivian, stop it. We've discussed this. Daniel is better off with my mother. Have we discussed it?" "I don't remember that conversation. I remember you and your mother discussing it. In emails I wasn't supposed to see." Marcus's face went pale. "What emails?" "The ones in the folder labeled Custody Strategy, Morrison v. Morrison. The ones where you planned how to manage me during the process. The ones where you discussed presenting a unified front to the court." Gasps from the crowd. "I can explain, can you? Can you explain why you were planning to take our son away from me without telling me? Can you explain why your mother had already established a trust fund that excludes me entirely? Can you explain—" I paused, letting the silence stretch. "Can you explain the DNA test your mother ordered 3 months after Daniel was born?" Eleanor's face went white. "What are you talking about?" "The DNA test you hid from Marcus. The one that shows Daniel isn't his biological son." The crowd erupted. Shocked voices, gasped questions, everyone talking at once. "That's a lie," Eleanor shouted. "She's lying. She's unstable, just like I said, am I? Then explain the results. Explain why my son shares Morrison DNA, but not through Marcus." Marcus was staring at me with an expression of dawning horror. What are you saying?" I'm saying that your Uncle Richard is Daniel's biological father. I'm saying that something happened to me at a family event 3 years ago, something I couldn't fully remember until I saw those DNA results. I'm saying that your mother has known about this for months and has been trying to take my son to cover it up. Eleanor was shaking her head frantically. This is insane. She's insane. Someone call security. Actually, a new voice interrupted. Someone already called someone else. Everyone turned to see a man in a suit walking across the lawn, followed by 2 uniformed officers. I'm from family court, the man said. We're here for the DNA order. Eleanor's expression transformed into triumph. Finally, I told you, Vivian. The courts are on our side. Now you'll see, the man looked at the file in his hand. Then he looked at Eleanor. Ma'am, I think there's been a misunderstanding. This order isn't for Mrs. Morrison. What? It's for you. Eleanor Morrison, you're being served with a court order for DNA collection in connection with a criminal investigation into Richard Morrison. Eleanor's face went from triumphant to terrified in the span of 2 seconds. That's impossible. Richard hasn't done anything. Richard Morrison has been arrested this morning on multiple charges of sexual assault. You are being investigated as a potential accessory based on evidence that you helped conceal his crimes over a period of decades. This is outrageous. I demand to speak to, ma'am. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you exercise it. One of the officers stepped forward. Eleanor Morrison, you're under arrest for obstruction of justice and accessory after the fact. You have the right to remain silent. As the officer read Eleanor her rights, as she was handcuffed in front of her own garden party guests, as Marcus stood frozen in shock, I held my son and felt something I hadn't felt in 3 years. Peace. The investigation took 8 months. Richard Morrison was charged with multiple counts of sexual assault spanning 3 decades. 4 women came forward to testify, their courage finally matched by a system willing to listen. He was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Eleanor Morrison was charged with obstruction of justice, accessory after the fact, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Her attempt to manipulate the custody system, to use her wealth and connections to silence victims and steal children, was laid bare for the world to see. She was sentenced to 12 years. Marcus Morrison was not charged criminally, but his role in the custody conspiracy was exposed. His career at his prestigious law firm ended the day the story broke. His reputation, built on the Morrison family name, crumbled along with everything else. The divorce was finalized 4 months after Eleanor's conviction. I received full custody of Daniel. Marcus was granted supervised visitation, which he rarely exercised. The Morrison Family Trust, the one Eleanor had established to exclude me, was dissolved by court order, with a portion of the assets transferred to a fund for Richard's victims. I got the house, the car, my freedom, but most importantly, I got my son. My parents came to visit the week after the divorce was finalized. They walked through my new house, a small cottage I had bought with my settlement money, far from the Morrison estate, in a neighborhood where no one knew or cared about society's scandals. This is nice, my mother said. This is yours. Finally. How is Daniel adjusting? He's too young to understand most of what happened. He just knows that Grandma Eleanor isn't around anymore and Daddy doesn't live with us. He seems lighter somehow, happier. Children sense things, even when they don't understand them. My father sat down in the living room, watching Daniel play with blocks on the floor. You did something remarkable, he said. Taking on that family, exposing the truth, protecting your son. It took incredible courage. It took desperation. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice. You could have stayed silent, accepted their narrative, let them take Daniel and tried to fight it through conventional channels they controlled. And I would have lost. They owned those channels. Exactly. So you found another way. You built your case. You waited for the right moment. You let them think they were winning until the moment they lost. I learned from watching you and Mom. My mother smiled. We taught you law. What you did with it was all you. Daniel toddled over, holding up a block for me to admire. Blue, he announced proudly. Yes, baby. Blue. Good job. I held him close, breathing in his baby shampoo smell, feeling his small heart beating against mine. I would have done anything to protect him, I said quietly. Anything at all. We know, my father said. That's what makes you a good mother. Not perfection. Not following Eleanor Morrison's rules. Just love, fierce, protective, unconditional love. Eleanor called me a terrible mom. In front of everyone. Eleanor Morrison is going to spend the next 12 years in prison for helping her brother assault women. I don't think her opinion on parenting carries much weight. I laughed, the first real laugh I'd had in months. I suppose not. What happens now? My mother asked. Now I raise my son. I rebuild my career. I create a life that's entirely mine, not defined by the Morrison name or their expectations or their money. That sounds like a good plan. It sounds like freedom. Daniel looked up at me with eyes that were his own, not Marcus's, not Richard's, just his. A child who would grow up knowing his own worth, far from the toxic legacy of the family that had tried to claim him. What do you want to be when you grow up, Daniel? I asked, not expecting an answer. He held up his block. Blue. I laughed again. Blue sounds perfect, baby. Blue sounds just right. If this story resonates with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and whether you've ever had to protect someone you loved from people who were supposed to be family. Like and subscribe for more stories about truth, justice, and the power of a mother's love. She's a terrible mom. I'm taking the baby. That's what my mother-in-law announced at my son's first birthday. My husband nodded like he'd practiced it. I kept my voice soft. Okay, take him. Everyone went quiet. She reached for my son. I stepped back. Then a stranger in a suit walked in. I'm from family court. We're here for the DNA order. My mother-in-law laughed. Finally, the man looked at his file. Looked at her. Not for her. For you. The DNA test she had hidden showed something she never wanted anyone to know. My son wasn't my husband's child. He was her brother's. Conceived through assault. At a family event I couldn't fully remember. She had known for months. And she was trying to take my son to cover it up. She's a terrible mom. No, she was a terrible person. And now everyone knew. Her brother got 25 years. She got 12. I got my son. And a future that's finally completely ours.